How's everyone doing today? Good. Good session this morning. Liked it? Cool. So we're gonna zone in on a couple of things. We didn't put any AI slides in here. I don't know why we didn't, because
especially with that key.
But we said AI, so now we're good and we can move on. So HCI. I would say 10 years ago, HCI really meant hyper-converged infrastructure. It's really now meaning hybrid cloud infrastructure. Yes, Nutanix still does the box that has the same box. Yes, we have compute. Okay. Oh. It's on. Okay. So, yes, we have compute-only nodes. Yes, we have storage-only nodes, so there's a lot of flexibility in that. A couple of things I just want to hit on this slide. So data center modernization, that really talks about, you take a look at what hyperscalers are doing today. They have the scale-out rather than scale-up method. The power is in the software, not necessarily the hardware. Gives you flexibility of choice of running your hardware of choice, be it Supermicro, Cisco, Dell, Lenovo. You can have it on bare metal nodes out in the public cloud. So you can run your hypervisor of choice. You want to run VMware, now Broadcom on top of that, you can certainly do that. You want to run containers and Kubernetes on the same type of platform, just different clusters, so that you're used to how the operating system works and everything, you can do that. You want to do VMs, you can do that. Edge computing growth. We've been seeing a lot of this. I don't know with your customers, specifically when Broadcom got rid of the robo-based, VM-based licensing. Who here had used robo VM licensing? Okay, so it kind of forces you now into a situation where you're having to license the minimum, I think, 16 cores, 16 physical cores. That makes a big difference from going from robo VM-based licensing to core-based licensing, kind of no matter what hardware that you have. A lot of these smaller nodes, you can get down to 8 cores on a lot of these, and if you're paying for 16 cores, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're seeing a lot there. We're seeing a lot of not just VMs, but also containers. Customers wanting to run containerized applications and environments out at the edge. You can do that. Hybrid cloud acceleration. The operating system that Nutanix is built on, we call it AOS, it creates an extraction layer, if you will, so that you can run that same operating system on the public cloud, on bare metal nodes, as you can on your private cloud infrastructure or a colo site. So what does that mean? That means you don't have to worry about interdependencies of your applications. Who here has tried moving something to public cloud and you move it and then something on your private cloud breaks? The application doesn't work anymore. Well, that's because there was interdependencies between the applications that as soon as you move something, then the whole works breaks. The operating system creates, again, that extraction layer to be able to allow. So wicked fast speeds getting out to public cloud. And cloud native, this is really back to that Kubernetes containers. Who's here running containers or Kubernetes type of environment? Couple of hands. Okay, cool. So benefits, the agility. I talked earlier about that ability to be able to run the same type of system and platform, run containers, run VMs, run your choice of hypervisor, run your choice of OEM for hardware. So that really is that agility. Scalability. We have customers that are running millions of cores on our platform. We have customers that have just a couple of robo nodes, and they're just out at the site. You can start off with a single node out at the site. You can go all the way up to as many as you need. In the data center, usually best practices start with 3. So scalability, simplicity is really, it's always been a Nutanix thing, is the simplicity. To be able to allow you to be able to focus on more things. We got a lot more customers these days that are focused on automation, self-service, working on the other security pieces, doing some developing, some programming themselves, rather than just always seems to be focused on the care and feeding of the platform itself. I'm going to hand this over. You want this?
I'll stand back here.
Okay. Green button.
Doing that. Can you hear me on this? Yeah. Perfect. Well, and to Scott's point there, the simplicity aspect I think is massive. I had an engineer I used to work with. He's retired now, working on wooden boats in Stillwater, Minnesota. But one of his favorite things was saying, "Hey, what Nutanix does at the core of our software, and really getting down to where our founders came from, is taking what things are inherently complicated and making them simple, automated, make things easier." To Scott's point, then allowing you to deliver more back to the business, focus on other projects, etc. So I know we got some familiar faces here. I was going to ask to raise some hands here, and I can't even see anything out there anymore, so I'm going to leave that one alone. But just to give a little background, it'll be building off of what Scott already talked about, but one of the biggest things is that our founders actually helped create the Google Cloud back in the early 2000s. So what they did is, at that time, a typical 3-tier architecture like we see on the bottom right of the screen, while it still has its use today, it's still a good solution, but at that scale is extremely complicated and extremely expensive. So what they did is they created software to help manage and scale out. So whether you call it, what do we call it, whether it's web scale architecture or whatever it is, it's really running software that is providing all of the resources to your application, to your business. So what they did is all of a sudden, hey, why are we just taking advantage of this technology? Let's bring it on-prem. Let's let other customers, organizations take advantage of this. So it's taking that traditional 3-tier with SAN, NAS, and what is can have a lot of care and feeding, and building it out into building blocks. So HCI, to Scott's point, back in 2009 is when Nutanix was created. 2011, we kind of got tagged with creating this whole category of hyperconverged infrastructure. And so whether it's scale up, scale out, to Scott's point, we have a flower shop as a customer, and then we have ones with thousands, and they're all running the same software. It's just at what scale and what you'd like to go from there. So one of the great advantages is, you can scale up, scale out, but you know what? Sometimes your servers and hardware and storage are all on different kind of renewal cycles. But as you need to refresh those, you can just build out your infrastructure. So compute, RAM, storage, all within a single node. You can get anywhere. So to Scott's point too, we support VMware. They've been a big partner of ours. We have our own hypervisor called AHV as well, Acropolis Hypervisor. We didn't put that out there as something that like, hey, the world needs another hypervisor. We were actually asked by some customers because it's based off of KVM. We've always partnered and worked well with VMware, but today I think we're at, is it over like 70% of nodes going out?
About 70% of people that are on Nutanix are running AHV. And to Ben's point, it was a lot of 3-letter government agencies that said we really want to run Nutanix, but we need a hypervisor, a hardened KVM hypervisor, to be able to do that. And that's how AHV was born.
Yeah. So today, trying to look at this, support AHV or Broadcom VMware as a hypervisor, and then building on top of it. I mean, the big thing that we have is also freedom of choice. So hypervisors, hardware, to Scott's point, whether it's Dell, Lenovo, Cisco, you name it, we can run on that for anything. But really what's the important part is all your applications, what's being delivered back to the business. So whether that is running in one single primary data center, Robo Edge, as Scott has already talked about as well, or at another colo site, or have all in between and a mixture of those. It's really flexible for what you would like from your business. Talking about security, I mean, that's a massive, massive thing today on everybody's mind, every organization. Out of the box, again, I'm not the best security person to be speaking about it, but out of the box, there's a reason that the 3-letter government titles really trust and leverage a lot of Nutanix. So security at the base core, whether you're looking at software-based encryption on the systems as well, in transit when replicating between your sites, all of it is secure, and we take that very seriously within the solution. So let's see here. Working with, NetCenter and our partners, really whatever you want from your deployment, we have that ability. But I think really the cool part, to Scott's point too, saying instead of hyper-converged, this hybrid cloud infrastructure, we have the ability to run Nutanix on bare metal in AWS and Azure. I know Google's on the roadmap. We talk about Google being where our founders came from, so I'm kind of surprised we don't have that yet, but it's coming down the road as well. So whether you're replicating on-prem, up to the cloud, back, between, the public clouds, whatever you'd like, if you're running Nutanix, we just view it as another location, right? So you still get all the advantage, all the efficiencies that come with Nutanix. Disaster recovery, I think we've kind of, hit on this one, but we have a lot of options, really dependent on how you want to deploy. But really where we're getting at too is we have that, this is kind of our phase one, I guess. That's Nutanix at the core, but it's more of a platform. We're looking at the other services we can provide besides just typical running your VMs. So getting into unified storage, running block, file, object, all within the same cluster. You can have dedicated clusters, but I think really one of the big values out of our unified storage, and Scott, you can probably chime in here too, is some of the security aspects that come within that. Security Central, Data Lens, we have the ability to look at all the different types that are out there of ransomware code or whatever it is.
And to be able to see what is happening with your data, so that, disgruntled workers, things like that, who's downloading files that they shouldn't be at a pace that they shouldn't be, things like that is, I know there are certainly other providers out there that do the same thing, but there are not a whole lot of organizations out there that provide that as well as everything else that's tied into the stack. And to be able to still have that flexibility of containers, VMs, integrations with other apps.
Yeah, perfect. So that's a huge value. We see a lot of our customers taking advantage of that. Then other things like this, database services. So in terms of efficiency on that, patching, copy data management, huge with the dev teams in terms of giving them the ability to self-service and actually get their own database needed for what they need to be doing versus having to go through a whole process that may take.
Yeah, and to be clear, database service is, we call it NDB, Nutanix Database Service, or it's not a database, to say.
Good call.
But Oracle, SQL, Mongo, Postgres, MySQL. So for organizations that either have a lot of databases or a lot of different types of databases, a lot of organizations will focus on like the crown jewels. So if they're an Oracle shop or a SQL shop, they'll focus on that. And then maybe they have Postgres, Mongo, MySQL, but they just don't have enough time to be able to do the care and feeding, patch management, and all the rest of that to be able to keep it up to date and secure. This automates all of that, so gives you more time back in the day for DBAs.
Yeah, perfect. That built out. And then looking at, Scott's mentioned also, which we don't have up here right now, but kind of container aspects. We have a native Kubernetes engine within the software as well, which is very huge for maybe not today, maybe if you're just dabbling in containers or thinking about it, but future planning to think about, all right, where's the business going in 2, 3, 4, 5 years? And is containers going to be that? And do we have a solution that can help us deliver that strategy down the road? And then getting into just our overall management. So looking at whether it's cost governance, hey, who within the business is, which business unit is spending the most money, how do we get charged back, how do we get funding, all of that. Also just in terms of overall kind of management and core base of Nutanix is, like I was saying, taking things that were inherently complicated, make them easy, leveraging, whether you want to call it AI or automation.
Yeah, a couple of things to add to that from a container perspective. Who here has heard of Mesosphere? And anyone, or Day 2 IQ? So we had purchased what was Mesosphere just recently, Day 2 IQ. So native K8 Kubernetes engine and platform, an entire ecosystem actually. Yeah. So it's not just something that we just decided to create. It's something that big data center Uber runs on that. Siri, whether you're an Apple fan or not, Siri runs on Mesosphere and on this app. So to ultimate scale. And the biggest thing about Cloud Manager is that it's a single pane of glass on private or public and across database service, unified storage. You don't have to go to different screens and different things to be able to, you can manage everything from one single area. And you can move workloads across clusters and across from private cloud to public cloud, just like you're moving clusters or workloads between clusters in a private cloud scenario. Yep. So that's something that just gives that freedom of choice and flexibility.
Yeah. So I mean, I think this is kind of the last piece of the build out. Yeah. We would whiteboard this, but you wouldn't want to see my handwriting or drawing skills. But
you wouldn't be able to read mine.
Yeah,
there's no way.
Yeah, it wouldn't work well. But one of the last things too is from end user compute and looking at VDI. Citrix is a massive partner of ours, and I think is now just Horizon. But back in kind of reeling back to 2011 when we first started shipping product, and if you go into a customer and say, hey, run all of your production and everything on Nutanix, and they're like, what's Nutanix? You got to find a workload that can actually work well. And so just inherently how our software and everything is architected, we're extremely performant and really excel in the end user compute and VDI side as well.
And extending upon that, we have relationships with both Microsoft as well as Amazon. Microsoft is actually looking at running AVD on Nutanix within Azure to be able to tell, and that's really because of our technology, data locality, which we haven't talked a ton about, but that ability to be able to have the VM and the data of the storage data that VM is using on the same node. Now the data is striped to different nodes as well for
replication factor.
For replication and be able to keep that data in other areas. But when you have the VM data and the storage data that is using on the same node, it moves at bus speed, which there's nothing yet faster than that in the compute world. So,
yeah, I think we hit on that a little bit later as well. But take over from here.
Cool. So a couple other things, and we talked about hybrid, but license portability, the same license, it's core based. So the same license that you're using on private, you can move that out to Azure, you can move that out to AWS, soon GCP, you can use other colo providers as well. So, but that's really no cloud lock-in. So, I mean, we hear all the time customers going through refactoring, modernizing applications to be able to get them out to a particular public cloud provider. What happens if they change their algorithm, their pricing? What happens if any of that stuff happens? You got to do it all over again. But again, if you're leveraging an operating system that creates that extraction layer, then if you move everything out to Azure or AWS and some changes, you just move it to another hyperscaler or move it back on-prem. You can just do it with clicks of a button within Cloud Manager. Native integration into public cloud accounts. So it's those bare metal nodes and those cloud providers are within the same VPC that you already have if you're a cloud customer today, which means that you have access to all those native services within that cloud provider as well. That also means that you can use Azure credits or your AWS credits and Cloud Commit to be able to work that down. In fact, one of our biggest VDI customers out in the cloud was trying to get out to Azure, and they couldn't get out there fast enough, and they're using Nutanix State Street. Do you have any idea? It's like 20,000. Yeah, it's just a massive amount of people. And that really helped them not only be able to keep the project on schedule and on time, but when they sign up for a cloud commit, whether you're using it or not, you're going to be paying for it. So if they can get out there and be able to get that done, at least they're getting their money's worth. We really hit on this quite a bit, so it's that elasticity between private and public cloud. So we're not going to spend a bunch more time on here. This really kind of gives it a different visual, but I think from we call it NC2, Nutanix Cloud Clusters, for that control plane to be able to allow you to be able to control all this from private cloud. Is there no little pointer or whatever on here? No pointer? Okay, cool. That's fine. Across Amazon, Azure, and then the services, unified storage. Everything's under a single management cloud platform and control plane. We talked about databases, Nutanix database service, and again, it's not a database, but it's an automation of that. So here's the Postgres, MySQL, Mongo. Is anyone playing around with these or using these open source type of databases, or mostly Oracle and SQL? Any hands of? Okay, that's fine. So some of the outcomes that we're seeing when we're helping customers with Nutanix database, in fact, the keynote this morning was about banking. And there's a massive bank that we did help them be able to resolve. They had two different initiatives. One of them was database in a day, which for an enormous organization, or really any organization, takes a while to be able to do. And so we took what took them weeks, sometimes a month, to be able to get something up and completed down to about 30 minutes. So average decreased storage requirements. This is that zero cost snapshot. Does anyone remember Actifio, the company, the Actifio, copy data management? Google bought them. And so they use it for copy data management now internally at Google. 97% average increase in speed of database deployment. Again, this saved them tens of millions of dollars, even after the cost of the platform. 3-year return on investment of almost 300%. Okay.
Scott was hitting on this too. So this is kind of getting down into how we actually manage our software and manage the data and VMs and everything. So one of the craziest parts is when you think about it like a SAN, you have your two controllers usually that manage everything, and as you get, add more space, more drives, might slow down a little bit, but you got two basically controllers managing everything. With Nutanix, each node has what we call a virtual controller machine, CVM. Controller virtual machine, how about that? So actually, starting off with the core system of 3 nodes, it's kind of the baseline cluster. You have 3 CVMs on each node, and they all work together to help manage the data and provide all the services that we talk about. But the craziest part is, like, as the cluster actually grows, because each node has a controller on it, performance is actually increases every single time that you scale up or scale out. So as you see up here, 3 nodes, there's a CVM, all of it helps manage the data. And then you have, within each node, storage, compute, and RAM to kind of build out the whole AOS storage layer. So all that storage is in a single pool, managed across all of your VMs. Anything I may be missing here?
In the CVM, some of you might be thinking, well, that sounds like overhead of the CVM on each particular node. It's minimal, and this avoids you having to have a separate cluster to be able to do that. And it's accounted for in our sizing. So when you work together with NetCenter and Nutanix, the sizings that you're going to get from us are inclusive of that CVM. So it's not like taking away from what is being presented.
Yeah, I didn't realize that the bottom had build outs below it as well, but pretty much everything we were talking about. But one thing that I kind of want to, I think we get that on the next slide, is data locality, and that's the performance aspect. So whatever VM sitting on whatever host, whatever node, all that data will be written and read locally. So you're going to have that performance. And so getting into how we actually write our data and manage it, we don't use typical RAID. We don't have typical storage management from that side. What we do is we leverage what we call replication factor, RF. And so it's RF2 or RF3. That's just the amount of copies of data that you have within that cluster. So I need to go back one.
And this is like this, whether it's on-prem, whether it's in public cloud on bare metal nodes, regardless of what OEM hardware manufacturer, it all operates the same.
Yeah, and as you'll see, the blocks of data, A, B, C, written down. So we'll start on the left side. So basically, the data is written to that node locally, and then with the software, the magic of it, it'll put a secondary copy of each of those blocks onto somewhere else within the cluster. So that's where you get your resiliency and replication factor, right? And so everything's being read, everything's going great. Something happens to that first node. As you see, there's still all the data there. It's all resilient. All the CVMs we were talking about are going to help manage and basically rebuild anything that may be lost to provide back the resiliency of your RF2. And so as you'll see here, then those blocks are rebuilt. You're back up to that resilient state that you guys had, architected and sized for. But so you can keep losing drives, and heck, you can even lose another node, and you're still resilient within this architecture. Excuse me.
This also means that we have customers that do updates and upgrades or whatever, just doing the regular work week, not waiting until weekends to be able to do it. They get their weekends back, they got their evenings back, just because it is so resilient that it's something that you can do during normal business hours, which in other platforms you wouldn't even think about doing.
Yeah, great point. And as you see here, now everything is built back out to ensure that, I don't know why I went backwards on me in there. Multiple copies of data are, what the heck? There we go, within that cluster. So because we don't use RAID, it's very different. You can lose drives left and right. You can lose nodes, as you see here, and you're still going to be in a resilient performant state. This one?
Yeah, so the message on this is, so not so much anymore, but in the past, we'd hear, well, AHV isn't enterprise grade. It doesn't have everything that that VMware has. And I mean, pick whatever you want within the VMware world, now Broadcom world, AHV has. And we would argue that even does better, because then you don't have an additional hypervisor on top of a platform. It actually complicates things a little bit when you're running VMware on top of Nutanix, quite honestly. But VMware runs faster on Nutanix than it does really any other platform, and that is because of that data locality, that moving at bus speed.
Yeah, and another point too, AHV comes included with your software, so it's not an additional license. It comes, you have it, and you can leverage it. So let's keep that rolling. Whoops. Were you gonna be talking about?
Yeah. So this is back to the management plane. Easy to use. Yes, there is. If you're used to VMware already, there is some learning that will take place, but again, the power of NCM, Nutanix Cloud Manager, is that everything, whether you're managing databases, whether you're managing Kubernetes environments, VM-based environments, database environments, unified storage, VDI, any of that is all within that same management console. So once you do learn it and get used to using it, it's not like you have to learn additional things on different platforms or different applications and use cases.
Yeah, and to that point too, lifecycle manager or maybe a couple LCM we call it, but single click, couple clicks, but upgrades literally everything, does all the checks, automates, makes sure that hey, you're not out of compliance and you get the right versions of whatever's needed out there. It runs it. So it's actually a feature that doesn't sound super, sexy, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's one of the favorite features that we hear from our customers is how simple and easy it is to do those.
Yeah, to Ben's point, it will go in and it will see the BIOS, the hardware, the software, the application stack that you're using, and check all of that, and then give you the options of you can go to this version, or this version, and they'll all be they'll all be supported. So you don't have to do that work. Well, get into those documents and stuff. Is this going to be supported? Is this going to break something when I do it? It does all of that check and balance for you.
Yep. I think we've kind of talked quite a bit about this stuff, but anything else you want to add in, Scott? Well, yeah.
I think, so my SE and I are paired up with Carrie Duckett. She came from the customer side and from banking as well. Yeah. And so what we're helping a lot of customers with right now is that self-service and cost gov. So the one customer that I'm thinking about, what they're looking for is they're a subscription-based company. So they provide a service, an end service to their customers. And not every one of their customers uses the same amount of resources within that, but yet the subscription is the same. The cost is the same, right, for these customers. They don't have the ability to be able to figure out, well, one customer, one district or whatnot is using a lot more of our resources than another one has. So this one allows them, CostGov allows them to be able to plan a little better because they can see who's using what. But it also allows them to be able to have a revenue generating type of situation that they can look at it and say, well, we got these customers that are using 2.5, 3 times more than what was originally planned. So we have the ability to be able to, charge an extra subscription or something on top of that to be able to increase our revenue. Without CostGov and that show back, charge back, that would be nearly impossible to do, specifically when you're talking tens of thousands, 100,000 different customers. The other thing, CostGov, it goes across not only private cloud, but it goes across public cloud as well, and it also is able to collect information from 3-tier environments running VMware. So if you have a hybrid type of scenario where you're running Nutanix, or you could run CostGov in the cloud if you wanted to be able to have better visibility into what your cloud spend is and where to be able to put applications. You could use CostGov just for that. And then self-service, be able to have that marketplace that's integrated. Now this, customers using Chef or Ansible or Terraform, but self-service allows that portal, that area that you can tie into something like ServiceNow so that your employees, your employees, people within the enterprise can go in to ServiceNow based upon what their already approved credentials are, be able to request an instance, and then there's guardrails that you can put in about that, and then you're not having to respond to those requests. They're within those guardrails, but that can be fairly highly automated. Yeah. which leads to that infrastructure ops, automation, things like that. This is something that I thought was going to be a bigger deal within the different marketplace years ago. It's taken a long time to get here, but we're seeing a lot more customers do it these days.
For sure. Well, and then this is really just getting down to kind of the last slide, and one of the biggest things is that I like to point out is our Net Promoter Score. Is everybody familiar with Net Promoter Score? Or should I give a quick? I'll just give a quick little background. Basically, everybody's had that survey. It's like, hey, on a scale of 0 to 10, would you recommend us to a family, friend, colleague, something like that? It's just one of those. But what can happen is off that scale, you can be negative 100 or positive 100. So we have had an over 90 Net Promoter Score for the past 7 years, which is incredible. If you look at anybody else within even the tech industry, it'd be hard to see it, over a 40 or a 45. But you can look these up; they're all public facing. But beyond that, the biggest point of this is our customers' experience. It's not just like, hey, the software is awesome, the product works. A lot of products, when they work, it's a good solution. But what's your experience when something goes wrong? So that's working with our support team and making sure that we get you back up and running, and that experience in a frantic moment is actually good. And so that's where we really invest heavily, is where I'm going, is our support team. So our support organization is great. It really helps with our Net Promoter Score, our customer retention, and then clearly I think even our number of customers, I think it's even a little higher. I think it's over 27,000 today. But it's a very big piece that we focus on, support and ensuring that you have a great experience.
Yeah, the only thing that I would underline on there is that that the Net Promoter is indeed, it's not just responding and say I was satisfied with the service, but what is the probability of you referring or suggesting or highly recommending Nutanix to one of your colleagues, family, friends, another coworker or whatever, which there's a huge difference, as I'm sure you all know, between saying, yeah, I had a great experience and I'm willing to refer or I'm going to suggest. There's a lot of people that don't want to go that far out there. So to be able to always, since 2009 when we started, to always be above 90 for a Net Promoter. And there are a lot of other IT organizations, big companies that are negative. They have negative numbers, like negative 16, negative 10s. And it's like, that's a long way from negative 10 to 90.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's the end of our slides.
Yeah,
so.
and I think that puts us a couple of minutes ahead of schedule.
Any questions? Anything you want to talk about? I know we kind of ran through a lot. Yeah.
Question. This is John. Just wanted to make sure I interpreted something correctly during your slides. You were kind of on a resiliency, talking about different nodes. Are you saying organizations are using the software to remain? Well, let me jump into it. I can't talk apparently today. You were talking about doing upgrades during
business hours. Yeah.
Could you touch a little bit more on that? Like, I want to understand, are they like using your storage to fail over?
Ben, can you go back to that slide where the nodes are going down?
Yep.
I think there's two things that are really critical on this particular slide. One is that it's striping of the data across a cluster. So the data resides, as we had talked about, data resides on the node where the VM is based, but it's also striped across other nodes. So if you lose that node, you don't lose the data. The other thing, the CVM, every node has a CVM, but if that node goes down, that work of the CVM that was on the node that went down is taken by other CVMs. And so they're kind of like chip in. It's like nothing. It's like it didn't happen. It's like you lost the node, but the VM the storage data that's on there was all striped across other nodes. So unless you have a catastrophic loss of, of a majority of the nodes that's not going to self-heal, it will just self-heal. And nothing that you have to do. This is innate to AOS, to the operating system.
Mm-hmm.
So that allows you, now it's still your choice whether you want to do upgrades and stuff like that during the middle of the day. But I had talked about my SE, Carrie Duckett. She did that. She was at a bank, and she decided, I like four-wheeling in my Jeep. I like riding my mountain bike and doing things like that during the weekend, and I don't want to be doing these upgrades. So she would just do them during the day. No one knew the wiser.
Yeah, and so like that process too is, I wouldn't say similar to like losing a node, but really what it is it does a rolling upgrade, right? So it'll work on one specific node, everything else is functioning. If something gets caught up in that upgrade process, again, nothing's lost. The data's still there. Everything's working. You call support, get on the phone, and they help you out in seconds, and it's back up in the state that you need. So it works through that process, and so you can do it. I guess it's really up to the organization if you feel comfortable about doing that during the business hours. But
was that a helpful explanation for your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would be happy to get into it deeper if you want.
Yeah, we'll take the whole conference and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that just popped in my head that we didn't have in the slide, we have a tool called Move. And so there's a lot of customers, of course, with what's been happening with VMware and Broadcom. Or if you had environments out in VMC, that was the environment that you could get just directly from AWS and so completely managed and everything. That's now changed, of course. Has anyone in here have environments in VMC or had environments in VMC? Wondering how to move that forward. Okay. Yeah. So the Move tool can move those workloads from from VMware or from a public cloud.
Yeah.
So Azure, AWS, from VMC to Nutanix. So if you're to AHV. So if you're worried about or concerned, how would I make this move? You could do it in line in production. Not a lot of customers do that, but you got a little extra space. You can move it over time. That's how most customers do it. But it's not a manual process. It's a very easy click-through, walk-through type of process to be able to get those VMs converted.
Yeah.
Anything else you would add to that?
No, I think that, it's a free utility that people leverage. And I think that's the other kind of cool part too, is we automatically get that conversion from VMware to Nutanix or AHV. But at the same time too, taking that one step further as well, as maybe the organization wants to stick with VMware, Broadcom in the production site, but don't want to pay for it on the edge sites. You can have a VMware cluster and then AHV cluster, and they replicate back and forth. We take care of that conversion, make sure everything works, on the fly. So I think that's just another cool little piece to it. Is
you can also
simplified.
use the Move tool to be able to convert files. So let's say you're on like a NetApp or whatnot. NetApp's coming to end of life, and you want to be able to move it over to Nutanix Unified Storage on a Nutanix environment. You can use that same tool to be able to move those files over. So it does more than just VMs. It does storage as well. Not all storage platforms, but a fair amount of them. Any other questions?
awesome. Well, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you.